Welcome to the Competitive Energy Services Lunchtime Webinar Series. Today we're going to be talking about New Hampshire electricity regulation and policy update. A few housekeeping items before we get started here. If you have dialed in, please mute your phone. If you're listening through your computer, please make sure that your microphone is turned off. And we will be recording this today, so we will be able to send it out later this afternoon or tomorrow. My name is Larry Pignataro. I'm an energy services advisor here at Competitive Energy Services, and joining me today also is Charlie Agnew, the Director of Energy Services here. So without further ado, we'll get started here. All right, so real quick, Competitive Energy Services. We're a full-service energy consulting firm. We're based in Portland, Maine. We also have an office in Topsfield, Massachusetts. Over 800 clients. We offer customized energy solutions. And just one very important thing to point out here, we are 100% supplier neutral, and we're working for the best interests of our clients. Quickly here, we're going to go over the agenda. We'll do a short legislative roundup. We'll talk about utility rate cases for both Eversource and Liberty utilities. We'll discuss the Eversource and Liberty default rates, renewable portfolio standards, and net metering here in New Hampshire. And lastly, we'll give you some trends and takeaways to be aware of. Quickly here, the New Hampshire Legislative Roundup. These are some of the bills that we have been tracking for this past session. One of the most popular bills that folks have been hearing about and that we've been tracking very closely is the net metering bill, HB 365, which this bill will expand the cap on individual systems that will qualify for net metering from 1 megawatt to 5 megawatts. You know, theoretically, with the increase here, this increase from 1 to 5 will bring economies of scale, thus bringing down the overall cost for these projects. This will make larger projects more attractive and economical, and hopefully open up opportunities for favorable pricing of offsite projects, possibly in landfills and other types of properties. This was recently vetoed by the governor, and we're hopeful that this Thursday we're going to see a revote by the House here. SB 166. This requires third-party energy suppliers to issue net metering credits for supply charges. So really, what this bill is if you do receive net metering credits, you need to be on default service with your utility. We will talk about default service costs here shortly, but really what this is, going to third-party supply would make most of these projects a little bit more economical. And lastly, the Renewable Portfolio Standard, SB 124. This is going to be expanding the percentages for all classes from, in 2025 to 2040. We're going to be talking about this in further detail later in the presentation as well. Both of those bills have been retained in committee, which means they're going to be rolling over into the next session next fall. I'm going to turn it over to Charlie to talk about the rate cases, the new rate cases for Liberty and Eversource.
Okay, thanks, Larry. Everyone's favorite utility topic here is when occasionally we have rate cases submitted. We have one for each of the couple major utilities here in New Hampshire. April 26th, Eversource filed their proposed increases in electric distribution rates. This affects the largest portion of New Hampshire customers. And the last time they did this was back in 2009. And what they've asked for is essentially a temporary increase that would take effect as soon as July of 2019. So this is coming right up. an additional $33 million in revenue that they're seeking, and a more permanent increase at the beginning of 2020, $37 million increase. So we're keeping an eye on this. There is a docket number open that we can follow, or you can follow. If you are a CES customer, or even if you are not, each of these different customers throughout the service territory may be affected differently by the proposals, all to be settled out in this rate case. So if you have any questions about how this will impact you exactly, we can answer those questions. For the time being, just know that these rates are due to rise. Same for Liberty customers. I know we have many of you on the phone today. On April 30th, Liberty Utilities proposed a rate increase as well. This was last done in 2016. Their case will be in docket number 19-064. This is a lesser impact along the same timeline, but also relevant to note here that some of their transmission rates will be decreasing, or have already, and will continue to do so in the next year. So that will help to offset some of the more permanent increases coming in July of 2019 and January of 2020. So I'm going to turn it back over to Larry to talk about a little bit of history around default rates.
Thanks, Charlie. As many of you know, New Hampshire has some of the highest default service rates in the country. And last year, April 1st, 2018, Eversource, New Hampshire service territory, had started taking supply service from third-party suppliers. They divested in their old PSNH assets. So they divested in about 1,200 megawatts of generation, which included 9 hydro facilities and 5 kind of old fossil assets. What this means is now Eversource will be going out to bid for the electricity supply for their default service costs to consumers. Additionally, customers last year also saw an increase in the stranded cost component. So just to have a quick look at the default services, these are the small and large rate classes in the Eversource territory for the past 12 months and out until July of 19. So Eversource will be adjusting their default service rate twice a year, August 1st and February 1st. They're going to conduct an RFP for the service, which will be reviewed by the New Hampshire PUC. So current suppliers that won the most recent bid were Exelon, which is Constellation, and NextEra Energy. So this next slide is a graphical representation of where the default prices are for a few different default class rates. So Eversource large and small, and we also included Liberty's large and small rate classes. And the red line is a Competitive Energy Services New Hampshire average. And what this is we took a look at all of our New Hampshire clients that signed contracts in the last 18 months and took an average of that price. So that red line kind of shows you where our clients are in the retail market comparative to what the default service is. And just a little bit more information about what Eversource is doing or what they did on their most recent RFP for the February start date. They issued the RFP last November. It was distributed to roughly 230 suppliers, and it was also listed on their website. To get pricing for this service, they broke the large and small into 5 separate kind of tranches, they call them. They listed the large group separately, and they broke out the small group into 4 separate equal tranches to bid that out. And that's what they're going to be doing going forward every 6 months. I'm going to turn this back over to Charlie to talk about the net metering policies and changes.
Thanks, Larry. And just to administrative note here, if anyone has any questions or would like us to pause and provide some more detail on any of the topics covered, please take a look at the chat feature and type in any questions you have, and we'll attempt to answer those on the fly here. I wanted to get into a little bit more detail about how net metering works in New Hampshire specifically. We have obviously some bills being considered that may, again, impact the size of a project for net metering, and also what type of supply a customer could opt for under a net metering agreement. That is, whether they could use competitive supply or must use default supply. But there is a little bit more to this, and so we're going to get into a little bit more detail about what else is existing policy here in New Hampshire. So if you were to consider any type of on-site generation, that could be solar or a generator of any type, any excess generation that gets exported to the grid can be monetized, or the value of that exported energy can be monetized through this net metering program. Again, if you are on the default energy service. And there are some provisions about the generator size, where if it is less than 100 kW in nameplate size, a full kilowatt hour credit would be issued. That is, both your delivery and supply side charges for the account that is being credited will receive 100% of the kilowatt hour value. As that generator gets bigger, anywhere from 100 kW to 1,000 kW, that credit would only apply to a portion of the bill. That is the supply charges only. So the value of that exported energy, even for a project of larger size, becomes less. Anything over 1,000 kW does not have any net metering credit value. So again, this is where an increase in that size would bring more value to folks considering larger projects to offset greater amounts of load. The one nice thing about New Hampshire net metering policy is that these credits are carried forward indefinitely. So those do accrue and can be credited when they are or can be applied against a utility bill. Simple. We break out net metering into a couple different categories to further complicate this. Conventional net metering is where you might have a solar project on site and produce at times or all the time energy in addition to or greater than the on-site load. In essence, your utility meter is creating a credit or spinning backwards, and that excess production goes back to the grid, and the generator can then receive a credit for that on another or a separate bill. Should that meter eventually catch up, or should your load catch up to the excess production, again, this is where that rolling, unlimited rolling credit value becomes relevant, because if at times the load does grow, which could be seasonally, you will then receive the credits for that excess production. In a virtual or remote net metering situation, the only difference here is that there may be zero or very little load at the site where the energy is created. And so in essence, all of the value is transferred to a number of accounts that are not the host account. So just a couple of examples as to how virtual and conventional net metering work in New Hampshire. Our next topic here today is providing a kind of an overview and update on renewable portfolio standards here in New Hampshire. Just to give some context to this discussion, there are a number of different elements in your total per kilowatt hour charge that we've broken out here. And right now, this RPS component is fairly small. But we wanted to highlight this as this could and is likely going to change here in the future. So what is renewable portfolio standards and RPS, as we call it? All electricity suppliers that sell electricity in New Hampshire must have a certain percentage of that electricity that comes from renewable resources. And in order to achieve that percentage, these suppliers can buy renewable energy credits. They can either own or contract directly with a renewable energy production facility through a power purchase agreement. And the third option is to pay an alternative compliance payment, which is established by regulation. If they are unable, or if the market for RECs is high, they can choose the alternative compliance payment. So those are the three ways that these suppliers do meet the RPS requirements established by the state legislature. And those renewable resources break up into a number of different categories. Class 1, which includes a thermal REC. These could be anything after 2006: wind, hydrogen, biomass, landfill gas, ocean thermal, wave current or tidal energy, and any geothermal systems that were installed after 2013 also fall within this category. Solar thermal, biomass, fuels. There are a number of different categories that fall in Class 1. Class 2 is a little more straightforward. That is solar electric only. Class 3 is existing biomass and methane. And Class 4 are small and existing hydroelectric facilities. So different technologies that fall within various class categories for New Hampshire renewable energy. Every other state in New England has similar but a little bit different categories. So if you're interested in learning more, we can certainly share that for other states as well. So one of the issues we thought to bring up is what is happening outside of New Hampshire, to put it in context with where we are today in New Hampshire and where we may be in the future. Southern New England has established some much more aggressive renewable portfolio standard targets. And New Hampshire and Maine, well, I should say Maine has a bill that is likely going to pass here in the current session that will also increased the 10% new renewables to 50% by 2030. So Maine may be looking much more like Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island in the coming decade, leaving New Hampshire as a bit of an outlier. However, Larry did mention the New Hampshire bill that would expand Class 1 and Class 2 renewables here in New Hampshire, currently at 9.6% for Class 1 with a percent, just over a percent carve out for thermal. That would bump up to 31% by 2040. And for Class 2, which again is the solar carve out, right now at 0.6%, that would be due to go up to 5.2%, excuse me, 18.9% by 2040. So Class 2 going from 0.6 to 18.9% by 2040. And there's a few different step-ups. One of the larger step-ups is in 2025, where they would increase 5.2%, and then every year after that, just about 1% per year going out to 2040. So what does this mean for customers? Really what we've seen in southern New England is this has greatly impacted cost of electricity and in compliance with these RPS standards. As an example here in the bar chart, we're showing the cost of each of the programs in Massachusetts, which total anywhere from 2 to 2.5 cents per kilowatt hour in RPS costs. As it is now in New Hampshire, under current legislation, the cost is roughly 0.5 penny per kilowatt hour for New Hampshire customers. So as these bills become or get negotiated and considered in the next session, this is something to keep an eye on. As New Hampshire progresses, we would expect something similar to the other New England states over the next 5 to 10 years here. So that covers RPS. I think we had a question. Larry, did you have a chance to? Okay, we'll might follow up with Lee after this. So a couple of key takeaways we wanted to share with you as we end for the day here. Keep an eye on your delivery costs. Both Liberty and Eversource customers are due to see some rate increases here in July. On the supply side, we're continuing to see the advantage in third-party supply, and that may change over time. However, the third-party market outside of the Eversource procurement process at least does appear favorable. So important to keep those accounts off of default. The challenge there is for anyone under or considering a net metering agreement, and hopefully that will be addressed in this current legislature. RPS costs, we're seeing increases throughout the rest of New England. New Hampshire is likely to follow, just a matter of when. As more renewables do come onto the electric grid, however, we do expect that this will suppress energy prices. That is, the largest underlying component of electricity is the cost of the fuel, and for these renewables that are relying on kind of out-of-market policy to support their installation, they essentially have zero energy costs, and as more and more of those zero energy resources are built, we expect that to drive down the cost of energy. Additionally, a topic we haven't covered today, but also relevant to the supply side of the bill, are these capacity charges, which for now are trending down through the next 4 years out through May of 2020. So another good sign for consumers over the next 4 or 5 years, capacity prices dropping. So what our opportunities are available, we see potential for on-site and off-site solar to take advantage of the increases or avoid the increases in utility delivery charges, and potentially capitalize on increasing value of these renewable energy credits. There's also kind of a pilot program for battery storage on a residential level for Liberty Utilities, and we'll keep an eye on that, but definitely keep watching out for anything that may come or become available for a commercial scale consumer. And anything else to add for today, Larry?
Nope. If anyone has any questions here, please use the chat feature.
And I think we'll be able to get back to you, Lee, here on your question about cost increases under docket 19057. So we'll follow up with you on that. So unless there are any other questions, just about a half an hour here. Thanks for your time. Appreciate everyone joining, and have a nice day.